What's up everyone, it's Bones here. In today's video, we're gonna be getting a little bit nostalgic. How nostalgic, you ask? Well, it seems Konami has decided to retrain a bunch of old cards and mash them into an archetype centered around the graveyard. But first, if you're a fan of in-depth combo videos, new set coverage, and occasional fun stuff that we like to do on the channel, then take a moment and stroll through memory lane with those thumbs up and subscribe buttons by clicking on them, veiling your presence with the spirits of Memento. Now, to begin, I want to start by reading the first retrain we have here, Dark Blade. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can discard one Memento card, then target one spell trap your opponent controls, destroy it. During your main phase, you can destroy one Memento monster you control, and if you do, special summon one level 3 or lower Memento monster from your deck. You can only use each effect of Memento Dark Blade once per turn. Now, this is sort of a lone fire blossom for the archetype where you can special summon out another Memento monster, but it does have to be level 3 or lower, and we are going to get ourselves our next new card, Memento Fairy Witch, and this one reads, if this card is normal or special summoned, you can add one Memento monster from your deck to your hand, except Fairy Witch. You can target one level 2 or lower Memento monster in your graveyard, destroy one Memento monster you control, and if you do, special summon the targeted monster. You can only use each effect of Fairy Witch once per turn. Now, you'll notice with these first two effects, Dark Blade happens to special summon out a level 3 or lower, while the Memento Fairy Witch can special summon out a level 2 or lower from the graveyard. And there's little nuances like that that may make learning this deck a little bit difficult, but that said, the concept of the deck is very easy, and it shouldn't be that hard at the end of the day. So we're going to use the effect of the Fairy Witch in order to add ourselves a Tatsu, and the Tatsu is our next new card, a level 5. It reads, if you control no face-up monsters other than Memento monsters, and I would like to point out that I do think that the translation of this is actually that if you control no monsters or all your face-up monsters are Memento monsters. If I'm wrong on that, you can correct me down below. You can special summon this card from your hand. During your main phase, you can destroy one Memento monster you control, and if you do, send any number of Memento monsters with different names from each other from your deck to the graveyard, whose total levels are less than or equal to the destroyed monster's original level. You can only use each effect of Tatsu once per turn. Now, we're going to be able to special summon it out so that we can send ourselves more cards to the graveyard, because that's kind of what this deck wants to do. And you'll see that we sent ourselves 3 names. One is the Fairy Witch, our next one is the next new card, Mace, and this one reads, during your opponent's main phase, if you control Nether Skull Dragon, which is the boss monster of this deck, quick effect, you can discard this card, then target one face-up monster your opponent controls, take control of it until the end phase. During your main phase, you can destroy one Memento monster you control, and if you do, add one Memento card from your deck to your hand, except Mace. You can only use each effect of Mace once per turn. Now, of course, being a hand trap change of heart, while also being in engine, is kind of nuts, but it's also a card that can search any of your Memento cards, including itself, in order to get a search for any Memento card in your deck, which is just a really nice thing to have. That said, I do think that the only downside about this card is that you just aren't really able to combo with it well without having to commit to your normal summon, which means that you can't just grab Dark Blade or the Witch and then get that extra normal summon. So when you're getting a search, you're really relying on having a Memento in hand for one of your other new cards that I'll go over later in the video. And now we're going to use the effect of the Fairy Witch in order to revive the Mace, and then we're going to use the Mace in order to get ourselves a search for the next new card, the Nether Skull Dragon. And this is our boss monster of the deck. It reads, cannot be normal summon set, must be special summoned from your hand or graveyard by shuffling 5 other Memento monsters with different names from your hand and or graveyard into the deck or extra deck. If you control no other monsters, this card can attack all monsters your opponent controls once each. Once per turn, if your opponent activates a card or effect, you can special summon one Memento monster from your hand or graveyard. And that's a pretty important effect, as it's going to dictate what you can do on your opponent's turn. And we are able to keep a Witch in the graveyard since it is the duplicate that we had in the graveyard, and we had to return 5 with different names. So we're going to allow our opponent to activate whatever, whenever we want to respond to whatever they activate. We're going to use the Nether Skull Dragon. We'll special summon back out the Fairy Witch, use the effect of the Fairy Witch, grab ourselves the Mace, and depending on the circumstance, you can get yourself follow-up via Dark Blade or a copy of Fairy Witch if you want to do that. But this gives us the disruption for our opponent's turn, and I'll take you on to the next one. Now, in this next combo, I want to show that the Fairy Witch is also a one-card combo because the entire point of the deck is to kind of cycle all the cards into your graveyard, as we're going to special summon out the Tatsu by using its effect. We'll send more cards to the graveyard. We send the same three, the Fairy Witch, the Mace, and the Goblin. We'll use the effect of the Witch in order to revive the Goblin, and now we can use the Goblin, and Goblin allows us to send more cards to the graveyard as we send the Dark Blade along with the Nether Skull Dragon. Now, the Nether Skull Dragon has the ability to revive itself from the hand or graveyard, so we're going to special summon it out, as we're then going to be able to end our turn on that. Now, for this next combo, we have the other new card I was talking about. Memento Bone Party reads, destroy one Memento monster in your hand or face-up field, and if you do, take one Memento monster with a different name from your deck and either add it to your hand or special summon it in defense position. During your main phase, you can banish this card from your graveyard, then target one Memento monster you control. If it attacks a defense position monster this turn, inflict piercing damage to your opponent. You can only use each effect of Memento Bone Party once per turn. And this is a pretty solid card because not only is it kind of a watered down branded opening, it just has the ability to also be a nuttier one because, as you saw, we have a 5k beatstick boss monster that we can turn into a piercer, which can enable some pretty crazy OTKs, but we're going to start by activating it, destroying the Dark Blade, special summon out the Fairy Witch, as we'll use the Fairy Witch in order to add ourselves the Tatsu. Then we can go into the main phase where we'll play around the draw efficiently like that. We'll use the effect of the Tatsu. We'll get ourselves some sends as we send the Mace, the Fairy Witch, and the Goblin, revive the Mace off of the Fairy Witch. Now we can use the Mace in order to get ourselves a search for the Nether Skull Dragon. We'll then special summon out the Nether Skull Dragon, and just like that, we're able to end up on the same thing. For this next combo, I would like to show what happens when you have Mace along with any other Memento monster, and we're going to start this one by normal summoning out the Mace. Now we can use its effect in order to net ourselves a search for the Bone Party, as we'll activate the Bone Party, pop the Trihorn or the Horn Dragon, and then we'll special summon out the Dark Blade so that we can use the Dark Blade, use the effect in order to get ourselves the Witch, as we'll use the Witch effect in order to get ourselves the Tatsu so that we can special summon out the Tatsu with its effect, and now we'll be able to get more names to the graveyard as we're going to send the Goblin and Dark Blade, use the effect of the Witch in order to revive the Goblin, and now we can use the Goblin's effect in order to get more names to the graveyard. Do keep in mind, I sent a trap just because you can send anything else that you want to, so treat this as whatever you want to send at that moment, and the one that you for sure want to send is the Nether Skull Dragon, as we're then going to use the Nether Skull Dragon now and revive it. Keep in mind, it's not an effect, but we're going to then get our regular setup off of just the Mace and any other Memento monster. Now, for these next few combos, I want to show off all our Memento cards with the Tatsu, because outside of your one-card combos, you just have your boss monsters, and Tatsu is really like the only extender. So we're going to start here by normal summoning the Dark Blade, special summoning out the Tatsu, then we can use the effect of the Tatsu, get our send of the Fairy Witch, Mace, and Goblin, which you'll notice is also a recurring theme. You do that because you want to be able to send the most names to the graveyard. You are sending a combination of cards that have to equal the level 4 or 5 or less, and that means that it's either going to be 3-1-1 or 4-1, and the problem is that we just don't have enough cards yet to really make the most use out of that, so what we have now is what we have to work with, and we're going to activate the Fairy Witch, get ourselves the Nether Skull Dragon, use the effect of the Fairy Witch to revive the Mace, then we can use the effect of Mace, which will allow us to get the trap. Now we can special summon out the Nether Skull Dragon, as we're going to shuffle the cards back into our deck from the graveyard, and then we can set our next new card, the Memento Fracture Dance. It's a trap card that reads, if you control a Memento monster, target one card on the field, destroy it. Then, if you control the Nether Skull Dragon, which we do, you can destroy one more card on the field. When an attack is declared involving your Memento monster and an opponent's monster, you can banish this card from your graveyard. All face-up monsters your opponent controls lose 1000 attack until the end of this turn. You can only use each effect of Fracture Dance once per turn, and this is pretty cool because it just makes it so that you have pops on your opponent's turn, you go to your turn, then you can banish it and have your opponent's monsters lose the 1000 attack. Now the next one we have is the Fairy Witch along with the Tatsu, And the Dark Blade and the Fairy Witch really are the best cards in the deck in my opinion, with the Tatsu being the third best. And I know that Mace reads like a nutty card, but it's just a card that isn't really a consistent combo piece at the moment because you're forced to get your Bone Party for it so that you can make the most value by going into it. So we're going to be able to get some sends off of the Goblin along with the Tatsu. As you saw, we filled our graveyard there so that we can special summon out the Nether Skull Dragon. And because we had the Nether Skull Dragon in hand, we were able to send a different name, which in this case we could send ourselves the Bone Party if you want to be able to enable your OTKs this way. Of course, there's other options that you have, whether it be a monster that you want to send or even the trap card that you can send. So with that said, I'll take you on to the next one. Now I want to show off Goblin plus Tatsu, and again, this should be pretty self-explanatory. We can normal summon our goblins. We'll use the effect of the Tatsu, and the Tatsu will be able to send a couple of names here. We don't play a second copy of Goblin, so we do only get a total of 2 sends there, as we're then going to use the effect of the Goblin, which will send 2 more names, and then we can use the Memento Nether Skull Dragon in order to special summon itself out. It's not an effect to special summon. That is important to note. It's kind of like an Infernoid. So we'll then be able to end our turn on this, and you'll see that we don't have any card in the graveyard, and we're just relying on a 5,000 attack and 5,000 defense body. So this is really something that you'll need other cards in hand to play with effectively. Now the next one that we have is the Mace, Tatsu, and our next new card, the Memento Horn Dragon, and it reads, if you have 3 or more Memento monsters with different names in your graveyard, you can special summon this card from your hand. You can only special summon Memento Horn Dragon once per turn this way. If this card on the field is destroyed by card effects, you can target 3 face-up cards on the field, including a Memento card that you control. Destroy them. You can only use this effect of Horn Dragon once per turn. Now, we're going to start this one by special summoning out the Tatsu, and I would like to point out, as stated earlier, there is a chance that you may not be able to do this if the wording on this is correct, but I believe that the effect is that you don't have to control a Memento monster, or all of them have to be Memento monsters. If you do have to control a Memento monster, you just normal summon out the Mace. As we're now going to continue our turn by using the effect of Tatsu, we'll send the Fairy Witch along with the Mace and the Goblin, normal summon the Mace, as we'll use the Mace in order to revive or add ourselves the Bone Party. We'll then use the Bone Party, which will pop the Horn Dragon, and then we can add ourselves the Skull Dragon. We'll now special summon out the Skull Dragon, as we're going to put back some of our Memento cards from our graveyard into our deck, and from here we can end our turn on that. Now I'm going to get onto the test hand, and the first hand that I want to show, because as you saw we were ending on a bunch of Nether Skull Dragon pass, and that may not seem threatening at all, but this is one of those hands where I want to show where the deck performs better than it looks. And you'll see that we have Droll, Ash, we also have the Trap card and the Hand Trap of the Memento card. So we'll special summon out the Fairy Witch, use the effect of the Fairy Witch to get ourselves the Tatsu, use the Tatsu, special summon it out, as we'll then be able to use the Tatsu to get our sends for the Mace, Goblin, and the Fairy Witch. We'll then be able to use the Fairy Witch to revive the Mace. We can then use the Mace effect in order to get ourselves a search for the Memento Nether Skull Dragon. We'll then be able to put back cards from our graveyard into the deck in order to special summon out the Nether Skull Dragon. Now we'll set the Fracture Dance, as we'll be able to end on the Memento Nether Skull Dragon, having the ability to get us follow-up since we already have the Mace in hand to give us that Hand Trap, or we can even add ourselves the Goblin if you want that target protection, but we also have the ability to get us a disruption through the Fracture Dance that plays around stuff like Dark Ruler, which can stop you from getting that extra search, and even then we already have the Mace, which is nice. Now for this final one, and you'll see that I am on the Branded Fusion, plus there can be only one. I feel like with all the different typings that we have in this deck, there can be only one was a no-brainer. That said, I also decided to build this deck similar to something like Vanquish Soul, because I felt that it had very similar pieces, along with a playstyle in a way where you're just doing things with one card in order to end on a pretty small board, and then everything else that you have kind of just goes with it. So we're going to start in the draw phase by activating the Bone Party, and we're going to pop the Dark Blade, and you can do this in order to spare resources, because otherwise you're normal summoning out the Dark Blade, or you're destroying the level 5 and you're getting into the level 3, then you're normal summoning the Dark Blade, which gets you into the level 3 anyways, and I just feel that popping it with Bone Party is overall saving resources. So we're going to use the effect of the Fairy Witch in order to add ourselves the Nether Skull Dragon. We'll then special summon out the Tatsu because we already have it, as we'll then be able to send ourselves the Goblin Mace and the Witch, as we'll then be able to special summon back out the Mace off the Witch, as we'll get ourselves the Fracture Dance off of the Mace. We'll then be able to use the effect, or we'll be able to special summon out the Memento Skull Dragon, as we'll then activate the Branded Fusion, and now you can either go into Mirror Jade via Albion, or you can go into Rinbrum, since this is a beast, and that's kind of why I went into Rinbrum, as I wanted to show that. From here, we'll also be able to set our Memento Refracture Dance or Fracture Dance, and the There Can Be Only One, and that's another thing, that because we have the There Can Be Only One, if you do go for Mirror Jade, these both happen to be worm monsters, and that's kind of important to note. But anyways, with that, I'll take you on to the deck profile. With all of the combos out of the way, we can get onto the deck profile, and the first thing I wanted to do is read over the new cards I didn't get the chance to go over. And the first one that we have is Nether Skull Temple Memento Ran. It reads, if your Memento monster battles, your opponent cannot activate spell traps until the end of the damage step. If a monster you control is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can target one of them, special summon one Memento monster with a lower level from your hand or graveyard, and you can only use this effect of Temple once per turn. Once per turn during your end phase, you can target one Memento spell trap from your graveyard, set it. Now, I would like to point out that while this card reads like it's pretty good, the reason why I don't play it is because it requires you to use it, and what I mean by that is that if you happen to start with an opening 5 where your hand is, say, Dark Blade, There Can Be Only One, Imperm, Droll, this, and maybe Memento, Bone Party, or like whatever, then it means that you have to activate this, then activate your Dark Blade, and sure, while it can force 2 interactions where your opponent chooses whether they want to stop the Dark Blade or the Field Spell, the thing is that it's always going to be smarter to stop the Dark Blade, and the Dark Blade can always get impermed as well, so that's kind of why I just don't like the Field Spell. It just feels more greedy than it needs to be with this current version of the deck. The next card that we have is Memento Boneback. It's another quick play spell. It reads, if a face-up Memento monster you control leave the field because of an opponent's card effect, special summon one Nether Skull Dragon from your hand or deck, ignoring its summoning conditions, and if your opponent moves the Memento monsters out of your graveyard while this card is in your graveyard, you can banish this card, special summon as many Memento monsters as possible with different names from your hand and or deck. You can only use each effective Boneback once per turn. So again, another card that reads kind of nuts, but the problem is that it just requires setup, and I built this deck in a way where we have 6 1-card starters, technically 7 with Rhoda, and then we have 6 1.5 card starters. We also have the 3 extenders with the 3 copies of Tatsu, and that's what I really wanted to key in with this deck. It really looks like it requires a lot of setup to get its whole thing going, but there's just so many ways to do it with a low amount of resources as seen in the previous combos. Then finally we have the trap card, or the Memento Cranium Burst. It's a continuous trap. It reads, while you control a Memento monster, your opponent's monsters that can attack must attack the Memento monster you control with the highest attack, your choice if tied. When your opponent activates a monster effect on the field, you can target one Nether Skull Dragon you control. It loses exactly 1000 attack defense, and if it does, negate that activated effect. You can only activate this effect of Cranium Burst once per chain. Now, I do feel like these cards are almost better in the side deck, just because it feels so specific for what you need, even though they have useful effects that can come up in different matchups, which is why I say that. I would also like to talk about some of the choices in regards to things like There Can Be Only One. You play a lot of stuff with different typings, which is really nice. You also have the crossouts, which which is important in this deck, because as you saw, you're just going for Nether Skull Dragon, and there's a lot of ways to stop the one card combos, and having access to Called By and Cross Out can be really nice to stop those impermanent ashes, which is also why Branded Fusion is in here. Branded Fusion can just either bait out the Ash, you're not really going into your extra deck like that. As you see, the extra deck is really all just follow-up stuff outside of what you play for Branded Fusion. And then there's just the hand traps, which you can play whichever hand traps or board breakers you want. If you don't want to play the Ash Blossoms and maybe want something more impactful, there's stuff like Thrust and Talents that you can play. And I would also like to talk about a potential going second strategy in some formats, where you can just play a ton of board breakers and then take advantage of the fact that you can do piercing damage and attack stuff with this thing, get the full value off of your Memento Bone Party. There's another new card here that I really haven't gone over. It's called SP Little Knight. It takes 2 effect monsters, and it's a partner in crime to IP Masquerena. It reads if this card is link summoned using a fusion, synchro, exceed, and or link monster as material, you can target one card on the field or in the graveyard, banish it. Also, monsters cannot attack directly for the rest of this turn. When your opponent activates a card or effect, quick effect, you can target 2 face-up monsters on the field, including at least 1 monster you control. Banish both monsters until the end phase. You can only use each effect of Little Knight once per turn. So, a really good card to complement IP Masquerena, and one that will probably come up a good amount in this deck just because you want to be able to get removal on your follow-up turn so that you can go for game without having to strictly rely on your Memento Nether Skull Dragon beating over stuff. But with all of that said, I don't really have too much else I want to say, as I showed everything else in the deck profiles or in the combos. So I'm going to go over the card by card, and we have the 3 copies of Mace, 3 copies of Fairy Witch, 3 copies of Darkblade, 3 copies of Bone Party, Fracture Dance, the 1 Rhoda, the 1 Horn Dragon, which I believe if we do get more cards, this will probably end up coming out, because it's just something that you don't really want to see unless you happen to have the Bone Party in hand, because then it's just an extra name that you can destroy. Then there's the 1 Nether Skull Dragon, the 3 copies of Tatsu, the 1 Goblin, the 2 Albaz, the 3 Branded Fusion, the 3 There Can Be Only Ones, 3 Imperm, the 1 Called By, the 2 Crossouts, the 3 Drolls, and the 3 Ash Blossom to round out the main deck. Onto the extra deck, we have the Rinbrum, the 2 Albions, the 2 Lubellions, the 2 Mirror Jades, SP, IP, Asa, Lina, Dark, Nightmare Unicorn, Access Code, and Avramax to round out the deck profile. So for everyone who's made it this far, I'd like to thank you for watching and for the 600 plus subs. I truly appreciate your support. Now that we've monetized the channel, giving us access to supers and memberships means that more awesome stuff is on the horizon. To get the channel membership, just click on the description below, and there will be a link that takes you there. You'll also notice a free Discord link that I've made for us too. If you want to support me as a content creator, even if you can't donate supers or get a membership for the channel, clicking on those thumbs up and subscribe buttons help a lot too. For those wondering, I do plan on making updates to the channel as the support on the channel grows. But anyways, I hope to see you on the next one. It's Bones, signing out.